Hello and welcome to the Game Theory Podcast. I'm your host, Sam Vicini. We're presented by The Athletic and CLNS Media. Today on the show, we've got good friend of the program, Dave DuFour, on. Dave runs the On the NBA podcast with Dave DuFour. He's a really, really sharp guy. Dave, tell the people about what your background is and kind of how you got into this kind of area that you're in right now.
Well, it was completely by accident.
That's what everyone is.
Yeah, I was actually living in South Korea and just was in the gym one day working myself out on the basketball court, and there was a parent whose kid wanted to make the high school basketball team, and so I started working with him to develop his skills. Next thing you knew, I had 3 or 4 kids, and then actually coached JV girls volleyball for a season, and that was interesting. And I was like, oh wow, I kind of enjoy this coaching stuff and working with people. And so I moved to Germany and lucked into a coaching job over there with some, in a lower division. And just really loved it. And then moved back to the States and realized it's not just, I can't just walk into the door at, in San Antonio, knock on R.C. Buford's door and say, hey, I'm a coach, hire me. And so then I just kind of started doing media stuff just to be around the game. I'm coaching high school basketball still because I enjoy it, but started this media stuff and found out, hey, it's not too bad. I really enjoy it. I was watching, like 12 hours of NBA basketball a night. Well, not a night, but a day. Anyway, so I might as well put this time to good use. Yeah. And so here we are. Like, I don't know. Last year was my first season of doing it, and so this is season 2 for me, and I enjoy it. It's fun.
Yeah, that's the way it always works. You kind of just fall into these things, and I always tell the story of how my master's is in the entertainment industry, and I worked in the entertainment industry out here for a while, and then fell into a job at CBS while I was writing on the side. So it's just kind of cool how everyone has a very different story and a different track on how they end up writing about basketball. It's just a really fun community to be a part of, and I'm glad that Dave is a part of it now because he's really, really sharp and understands the way that the basketball is going within the NBA, to a lesser extent within college as well. So today we're going to talk about a lot of the early season trends of the NBA. We're going to talk about it within the context of specific teams, right? And, there are obviously massive caveats with early season basketball. Just like everyone expected coming into the year, the Clippers and the Blazers, who play tonight after this podcast is recorded, but before it'll be released, they have the 2 best defenses in the NBA coming into Thursday. And Orlando has a 113 offensive rating. Some of this stuff is going to even out. It's just the way that the NBA goes early in the season. It's really hard to kind of gain trends. The Warriors and the Cavs have lost games. It's difficult to really say that you can certainly paint everything with a broad brush. You do learn some early season kind of takeaways, though. And I think that it's interesting within the context of this early season basketball to kind of go forward and see what we see early and see how it translates to the rest of the season.
I agree with you. I actually, coming into the season, I vowed to not say it's early, but I didn't want to do that. What I want to do is analyze the games up to this point for what they are, which are actual games that count in the record books. They are real. Yeah. This is not preseason. They're not exhibitions. They're real games. And if you extrapolate it, if you think in terms of baseball, 4 or 5 games in an NBA season is like 20 to 25 games in a baseball season. Mm-hmm. No one says after 25 games in baseball, well, it's really early. I mean, yes, it is early, but there's still things you can take away. For instance, you brought up the Orlando Magic and their 113 offensive rating. I actually think that that's real. I think that they've just finally realized, hey, we've got a bunch of young horses that can run, and running makes up for all manners of ineffectiveness in your offense, whether it's your scheme or guys who can't shoot, because they're going to get to the rim. They're going to have more uncontested shots at the rim and things like that, especially with the athletes they've got. So I actually think that that's more real than it seems. Now, 113 is probably not going to be where they wind up at the end of the year, but I wouldn't be shocked if they were, 10th in offensive rating. Teams are going to catch up, and they're going to start getting back on them on them better, and so it's not going to be as effective. But I mean, I think that they've got the guys to actually be able to pull this off effectively.
So we're going to talk about Orlando kind of second in this episode because I find what they're doing interesting in a lot of different ways. Before we get there, though, we're going to talk about San Antonio because to me, San Antonio is kind of the story of this this NBA season thus far. They would also be the story of the college basketball season because they would certainly be undefeated there.
Absolutely.
But they're 4-0 right now. Their defense is really, really good, as everyone expected. But I think that we had a lot of questions coming into the year about the offense without Kawhi Leonard. The defense is obviously going to take a hit without Kawhi, but their scheme is just so good and their principles are so sound at this point that I figured the defense would just – it wouldn't necessarily be as high-end as what we've seen so far, but I figured it would be fine. The offense has been really, really good. They're playing it right around a top 10 offensive clip so far, and the thing that I've enjoyed most about it is the fact that after LaMarcus Aldridge signs his extension, which I thought was a pretty reasonable deal given the fact that they get 3 years on top of, they get 2 years on top of him opting into next year. And then the third year is extremely non-guaranteed. I think it's 2/3 non-guaranteed.
$7 million.
Yeah, $7 to $8 million guaranteed to him, 16 or so non-guaranteed. That deal just made sense to me, but everyone crushed it, and everyone was like, he's maybe done. He's not going to be as good as he is. He's been one of the best players in the NBA so far this year. Rudy Gay, another guy, coming off of a terrible injury last year. People wondered if he was going to have a ton left. He's been awesome this year. He has averaging like 15 points a game on ridiculous efficiency. He's creating shots within the flow of the offense, and I've just loved everything I've seen from them. You look at a guy like DeJounte Murray who stepped up. You look at what Danny Green has done. Danny Green is averaging 15 points a game this year, playing ridiculous defense as he always does. When people bring up his name, like in potential trades, because he's really the only salary at this point that you can throw in at like $10 million, I think it's crazy. He's a perfect fit for what they do. What are your takeaways from San Antonio so far that has made them as successful as they've been in the absence of Kawhi Leonard?
Well, I mean, you got to start at the top, right? I mean, the organization itself gets these new guys that come in, and Pop works his magic on them, and they look like they've been Spurs for 10 to 12 years. I mean, Rudy Gay is a guy who I think has been miscast throughout his career as a primary scorer, and it affected our perception of him. And we saw in Sacramento he was a much better player than in Toronto and Memphis, because his role was different. He was the second guy. He was, a lot of times he was the third guy. And I think
played him as a small ball four as opposed to playing him on the perimeter much more. It was a really smart move.
Exactly. I mean, Rudy Gay last night played some small ball five.
It's great.
Right? He's a big guy. Rudy Gay has come back so well from this Achilles injury. I'm considering just having an Achilles surgery myself just to see if I can get some spring back. He looks so good. You brought up the 15 points a game. He's only shooting 1.8 threes a game so far through 4 games. So he's shooting I think he's taken 7 attempts or something like that, which is crazy because you would think, okay, well, Rudy Gay on the Spurs, they're probably just going to use him to space the floor, but they haven't. They've been getting him a lot of high post touches, and he's able to pass out of these possessions, and he fits so well with what they're doing. And then the other guy is Joffrey Laverne. Joffrey Laverne is now like this rotational cog for the San Antonio Spurs. To the point where I think he's out for the next. He was out last night. He's out for the next game because of the ankle injury.
Yep.
And I missed him on the court. I was like, oh my god, they don't have Laverne. What are they going to do? And of course, they figure it out. So I think that it's Pop again proving that he's the greatest coach in the history of the sport.
Yeah.
And he just makes these guys work. Kyle Anderson playing more at the 4, getting the ball in his hands more because Kawhi is out, so they're using him more as a ball handler. Danny Green somehow learned how to dribble. It is the craziest thing I've ever seen. He had a lefty finish last night where he dribbled through traffic, and those used to make my stomach kind of like I got nervous for Danny Green anytime he dribbled in traffic, and now he looks confident. It's so weird. He had 5 blocks in a game the other night, and that's something he's always done. The defensive intensity I was never worried about. Danny Green is so good. LaMarcus Aldridge was very good last year as their center. Who I've been really surprised by, DeJounte Murray, looks like he's in year 4 or 5 rather than year 2. His rebounding is real. I think that what is he averaging per game right now? I know he had one huge game. I've got the stats right in front of me. He's at like 8 rebounds a game.
Something like that. Guard. He was at 9.7 going into last night's game.
Yeah, so for a guard, I mean, that's really, really great. His length and his positional versatility, especially with Danny Green, I just think that that's been hugely beneficial to them. And it's something that the Spurs have actually lacked during Tony Parker's time, because Tony Parker's so bad at the point of attack. Now they've got DeJounte Murray, who moves his feet as well as anybody in the league, and he's all arms. So I think that you can, again, it's the Spurs culture. It's a whole team effort to get them to 4-0 and to look like, to make me look like an idiot for saying they're only going to win 55 games.
Yeah, like I was worried about them winning 50 games coming into the year, honestly, with Kawhi Leonard.
I said the same thing last year. I thought that last year, losing Tim Duncan and replacing him with Pau Gasol, I was like, oh, man, their defense is going to take a nosedive. They're going to win 49, 50 games. And then, of course, they win 61, and I look like a moron.
Yeah, it's just crazy. I mean, I think one number that kind of shows this, they're second in the NBA in hockey assists, right? The secondary assist where, you reverse the ball around, you get a secondary assist, being the second guy to pass the ball. It's a really, really impressive number there. Their defense, like I said, everyone's just going to kind of fit into that scheme at this stage. And what they've done really, really well, I think, is play guys with a lot of length. DeJounte Murray has like a 6'10 wingspan. Danny Green has like a 7-foot wingspan. Kyle Anderson has like a 7'2 wingspan. Pau Gasol has really long arms. LaMarcus Aldridge, I don't know that he has a ton of length necessarily, but he's 7 foot tall and he's big. The length that they know how to utilize on the basketball floor is really, really valuable, and they understand how to cut down angles due to just being so well taught from that coaching staff. Yeah,
absolutely. Well, LaMarcus, what he lacks in wingspan, he makes up for by being really light on his feet.
Yep.
He's like Al Horford in that respect. Like, very light on his feet. He's not fast, but
he's not as good as Al because he's not as fast.
Right, exactly. But he's light on his feet, and that allows him to move pretty well. And then again, the Spurs, they don't ask him to do anything that he can't. And I think that's so, like, if you look at what Minnesota is struggling with defensively, I think that they're asking some of these guys to do things that they're just not able to do yet. Mm-hmm. Whereas the Spurs don't do that. I mean, Pau Gasol drops back in every pick and roll. That's just what he's going to do. And they're going to surrender the mid-range shot all day long, just like they did against Houston last year in the playoffs. And they'll live with that because they don't want Pau getting roasted up top. Not just because they don't want to give up the bucket at the basket, but also they think about the long-term effects of getting roasted for a center. And I think, like at a certain point, you start to lose confidence. It's like Markelle Fultz continuing to shoot these bad free throws. Better off not shooting at all, and then just come back and shoot free throws in like a month. But with LaMarcus offensively, the biggest thing has been he's running the floor so hard, and he's getting really early, deep post position. So the buckets that he's getting are much easier than the attempts he was taking last year. And he's taking 20 shots a game, so it's a lot of volume. But at the same time, I think that he's the kind of guy, sort of like DeRozan, where he's actually better as a volume guy. Like, he needs to eat up some of those possessions to get himself going. But the way he's performing, 26 points a game so far, that's pretty good, man. I'll take it. If it means you're going to get that out of him, he could take 20 shots if he's going to score that.
Yeah, I think at the end of the day, you just have to be happy with that, and you need someone who's going to eat possessions offensively, and he's shown so far this year that he's capable of doing that at least. We'll see how long it stands up. He has like a 56.5 true shooting percentage, so just slightly above league average. As long as he can do that on a 30% usage rate, they're going to be happy with that production. The interesting part is going to be how they integrate Kawhi Leonard, how they integrate Tony Parker back, because Tony Parker is apparently coming back from injury considerably earlier than what I anticipated personally. He's going to take a G League assignment this week. I love this team. I'm very interested to see how long this stands up. Do they eventually start resting their older guys and maybe only end up right around that 55 win mark? But lot to kind of unfold this year, obviously, but I've been really, really impressed with the Spurs.
Yeah, I think this might be the year Pop actually I think he's going to stagger Kawhi and LaMarcus so much. I think they'll close together, and obviously they'll start together, but I think they're going to be staggered so much that it's going to be what we expected in Houston with Chris Paul and James Harden. You're going to have one of these elite scorers on the court at all times, a guy that can get you a bucket anytime. And I think that's the trick to reintegrating Kawhi into what they're trying to do with LaMarcus, and I think it'll be fine because – the other thing is I think LaMarcus is going to shoot more threes when Kawhi comes back. I think he's going to have to. As a function of the offense, he's going to have to step out to the three-point line some just to open up those elbow touches and those mid-post touches that Kawhi likes so much.
I'm always skeptical on guys like that doing that just because I think it's more of a habit thing and a muscle memory thing than we give it credit for. We just say, oh, step back and shoot threes. Why wouldn't you do that? But these guys, LaMarcus Aldridge has been playing basketball now at a high level for 17 years probably from the time he was like 15 years old. So yeah. I think at this point it's really difficult to teach an old dog new tricks, quote unquote. And it's okay to me if he doesn't do that, though. Rudy Gay, I think, is capable of stepping back and shooting a few more threes. Maybe LaMarcus takes one more three a game and, replaces one of those mid-range shots with a three-point shot. I think that would be fine. I think it's going to be more just by committee to space the floor around what Kawhi Leonard likes to do. Before we move on here, Dave, I have to pay the bills on the show. This episode is sponsored by Greats, makers of the all-time greats, classic, stylish, and comfortable sneakers sold at a great price. Greats is Brooklyn's first sneaker company. They sell all the greats, classic styles, made the best for less. They have a wide selection of men's and women's shoes with versatile styles suitable for any occasion. They have tons of different colors. They have materials to choose from. Their best sellers include the all-leather Royale lace-up and the Worcester slip-on. They sent me a pair of the all-leather Royales. They're very, very comfortable. They're very useful. They're very handy for someone who just wears sneakers constantly, and these are actually a little bit more classy than my sneaker collection. You can check all those out, along with lots of other great styles at Greats. And we've got a special deal for our audience. Save 15% on your first order with our offer code GAMETHEORY. That's GAMETHEORY. Go to greats.com. That's GREATS.com. And be sure to enter Game Theory to save 15% at checkout. Greats also believes so much in their shoes. They offer a no-risk return and exchange policy to guarantee that you get the right fit in a style you love. That's greats.com and use our code Game Theory to save 15%. Now, back to the podcast. Let's move on and talk about Orlando, because Orlando to me is probably the most interesting team that I've seen so far, if only because what they're doing is so markedly different from what we've seen in the past from them. As Dave mentioned, the offense is right around a 113 offensive rating. They're actually fourth in tempo right now. They're averaging, what is it? I believe it's like 107 possessions a game so far this year, which is wild for them. Or 107 possessions per 48 minutes, I guess I should say. They're getting really, really good ball movement. They are getting out in transition and, trying to score that way because they understand with guys like Aaron Gordon, Jonathan Isaac, Mario Hezonja, the players they've drafted over the course of the last little while, Terrence Ross, another guy that they've traded for. Elfrid Payton's a lot more comfortable getting out on the break. A lot of these guys, it just makes a lot of sense to run, and I like the fact that they're embracing it despite having a coach in Frank Vogel that has been a little bit hesitant to do that in the past. Maybe it was due to circumstance in Indiana, having a guy in Roy Hibbert who was so good defensively that it made sense to slow the pace down, having a guy like David West who's not necessarily always going to run. Maybe it just made sense, and maybe he's always been more of okay, I'll go by whatever my team wants to do, whatever my front office is saying to do, whatever my players, how that fits their scheme best. But he didn't do that last year in Orlando, and I thought that would have made sense. So what are your overall takeaways from Orlando thus far?
Well, again, I think it's a matter of Vogel seeing what he's got and actually playing people to their strengths. Yeah. Aaron Gordon is the number one guy that stands out. He had a huge game the other night. He was 5 of 5 from 3. I mean, he's just been incredible, and I think that playing him at the 4 is where 4 or 5 even is where his value comes from. And when you play him at the 3, you lose that value.
Yep.
And they've been really pushing the pace. Like I said before, when you're getting out and running in transition, and you've got the guys like Aaron Gordon, who's just a freak athlete, Jonathan Simmons, freak athlete, and you can actually let them get the defense on their heels, you're going to get easier looks, and they're going to be early. You said 107 possessions a game, which is just insane. If they can maintain that, I think they've got a shot at the playoffs. I really do think they could be like the 7 or 8 seed in the East, which is just insane to think of because this organization has just been such a mess for the last, since Dwight left, basically, since the Dwight trade. It's just been a mess. And a lot of that has been organizational dysfunction, not quite knowing what they're drafting and where they're going to put, like Aaron Gordon, for instance, playing so much of the 3. That was not the coaching staff. That was an organizational directive. Mario Hezonja not playing. The stories I've heard out of Orlando have been that it's a lot of attitude stuff about, defense and stuff like that. So maybe he wasn't the best fit when they drafted him. He might have been a guy that would have been better off going to a more veteran team. But it feels like these guys have all bought in, at least early, and they're just Vogel is letting them play, which I think is important for young guys. Sometimes it's nice to just let them go out, play the way they want. They've got 3 guys scoring over 20 a game right now, and that's impressive.
Yeah, so I think it's worth pointing out 2 of those guys, right? Nick Vucevic has been awesome so far. I know that before last night, he was leading the NBA in plus-minus. And if you know anything about Nick Vucevic, as I'm sure Dave does, he was a guy that always struggled with that statistic. And obviously it's early. Obviously plus-minus is not necessarily a terrific measure of a player, but I think it says a lot in his case that he was able to turn it around a little bit and make it so that he's a guy that you wouldn't think of as traditionally being good in an up-tempo scheme. Right? He's a guy that derives a lot of his value from crashing the offensive glass, theoretically, from, kind of being a option that you can throw to in the mid-post. He can knock down a jumper. He can kind of attack a mini closeout here and there and get a floater, get to the rim. Like I said, good post weapon, good offensive rebound weapon. That stuff doesn't really translate to the full court, but he's been really, really good so far there. I like the fact that it shows that he's been buying in, it seems like, to that. And Aaron Gordon, as you mentioned, he's played 2 games so far, so we'll see if this is for real. But both games have been really, really good. Obviously, the one last night was just unbelievable. He scores 44 points, and like you said, knocks down threes. It's a big matchup nightmare to have to deal with him as a 4, as opposed to having to deal with him as a 3, because he can actually blow by guys with more ease, I would say, than what he's able to do against threes.
Yeah, to talk about Vooch for a second, he's shooting 37% right now from 3 on about 5 attempts a game. We already knew he could shoot threes, but he is blistering on above the break threes. And for a center with a team that likes to run, that's fantastic because it means, hey, now we've got a trail guy that we can get the ball to. And we know he's going to be open because we're going to cause the defense to collapse by pressuring the rim in transition. And now we've got a release valve. And he's probably the best shooter on the team.
He's up there. If he's not.
He's one of the best.
But yeah.
Yeah. And so to have that in your center, I just think is amazing. And so I think that's been a big key to their success is that, he's been able to sort of take advantage of the space that they've given him, not through their shooting or their actual floor spacing, but through that transition offense.
Yep.
And then with Gordon, his shooting looks better. Like his shot looks better. The mechanics look better.
He gets better rhythm. It looks like it comes up from his lower half a little bit better.
Exactly. He's not fighting the natural dip. There's a lot of coaches. You can look at Josh Jackson, and he's a perfect example of this. Someone taught him that you're not allowed to drop the ball after you catch it, but it's completely natural that the ball would come down and then go up. There's like 3 guys in the league that can shoot with no dip: Klay Thompson, Manu Ginobili, and Joe Ingles, and that's it. Everyone else, Steph Curry, all of the elite shooters, they have a dip. It's not an exaggerated dip. You're not bending over and touching your toes. It's just natural. And now Aaron Gordon actually has that. It should prevent him from shooting on the way down, which was something that he used to do a lot. And that causes your shot to be flat because you use a lot more arm and all that. Anyway, not to get into the minutia of jump shots.
That's what this podcast is for.
Oh, perfect. His jump shots just look so much better. And it's only 2 games, but he's getting to the line 8 times a game. And that's huge for him.
Because he's always been able to handle it. He just never utilized it as much.
Exactly. I mean, if he were to keep this up, I mean, his career, his best season was last year's 2.7 attempts a game, and he's a decent free throw shooter. So I mean, if he could go 8 times a game, that's massive for this team and for him overall in his development. He could actually become the guy that we expected him to turn into, which is sort of a mini Blake Griffin. But he's learning to shoot earlier.
Well, you know, it's great that he is developing into this, and I think that Aaron Gordon's career so far is kind of a microcosm of a thing that I always talk about. I think that we give up on young players and rookies way too early into their careers, just as a natural kind of, oh, they aren't playing well right now. You know, I wonder if they're ever going to get there. Time's running out.
Right.
To me, that's silly. Like Aaron
Guy's
Gordon,
21 or 22 years old.
About to turn 22, I think, or if he might have just turned 22. Like, Aaron Gordon came into the NBA, he was 18 years old. Guys, as they come into the league younger, are just naturally going to take time. Last year, there were 16 one-and-done players who declared for the NBA draft. The year before that, I believe it was 15 one-and-done players who declared for the NBA draft. These guys are going to take time. It's going to take a lot more energy to develop these guys, and that's why development staffs now in the NBA, I think, are becoming more and more important. I think that they're things that NBA teams really need to sink resources into more than they might have had to 4 years ago, just due to the youth that's entering the NBA. And Aaron Gordon is a prime example of not giving up on someone too young. I don't think he's going to drop 20 points a game this year even. I think he's probably going to be around like 18 points, maybe 7 rebounds, 8 rebounds, a couple assists a game. Going to have an awesome year. Maybe he will average 20. I don't know.
That's a max player, though.
But I think that at 22 years old, that's pretty darn close to a max player. Like, yeah. Aaron Gordon is going to be a really good basketball player. He just needed time to develop. Now,
Can I follow up that point that you just made about giving up too early? I think another side of that coin is also anointing guys too early.
Sure.
And like the Karl Anthony Towns MVP talk for last year, you know, like things like that.
Yeah.
I think that it's because we just don't have enough to talk about. You know, we don't have enough to talk about. So we've got to do this kind of stuff. So I'm with you on that kind of being bad from a media perspective. As far as the player development stuff goes, Orlando has not done a good job of that, which is why this is weird. It's unexpected. I just did not think. I thought Aaron Gordon was going to come out and have a very mediocre year like he did last year. But so far, if this style change for their team is real and it's not just we're getting out and running early, then this is a huge turning point for him. I think this again goes from a guy who might have gotten like 4 years, $48 million this summer to being in the conversation for a max deal.
Yeah, no, I agree with that 100%. Now, I do want to talk about this with Orlando. They're not going to have a 59.8 true shooting percentage throughout the entire year. They're second in the NBA behind the Warriors right now. It's just not going to happen. Like, I can promise you that they're not going to shoot that well throughout the year. Having said that, they are generating really, really good shots, and I think that that's worth pointing out. They're 10th in assist rate currently in the NBA, which proves to them getting good ball movement. Some of that is coming in transition, of course. But they're also doing a relatively good job of limiting turnovers. That's something that Elfrid Payton has struggled with in the past. If they can limit turnovers, continue to get good ball movement, their true shooting percentage, I think, could stay above the league average. Despite having a team that, like you said, Nikola Vucevic might be their best shooter. Terrence Ross is maybe their second best shooter. Yvonne Fournier can shoot it a little bit. But beyond those three, I would say, like, we haven't seen enough of Hazonia yet to think that he can be an awesome shooter. Elfrid Payton, obviously kind of a non-shooter. I think that we can just kind of say that at this stage, given his mechanics and given what we've seen from him at this point in his career. I'm still skeptical on Aaron Gordon. I'm not going to lie to you, being anything more than a 36% three-point shooter. But Jonathan Simmons, not a great shooter. Jonathan Isaac, going to take time as a shooter. Like, typically the teams that have a super high true shooting percentage end up being the teams that can really shoot it. I think that because Orlando's getting good ball movement, getting out in transition, it can stay relatively high, not 59.8%, but can stay relatively high as long as this continues.
You know, if you've ever watched any lower level basketball, and I know you have, high school, college,
too much,
especially at places where they don't have a ton of talent, you probably have noticed this. There's a lot of pressure defense, and they leak out and run a lot because it can cover up for, having poor shooters or having poor ball handlers or things like that. And I think that this is you would think that more teams that lack talent, especially shooting talent, would get out and run more. And it's
hard
nice
in the
to see
NBA,
it.
Though.
It is tough because there's so much length and everyone's a freak athlete. And also the games are just really long. But I think that if Orlando can just keep something close to this pace, I think they're gonna be trouble for a lot of teams, man. Especially older teams. Like
that I agree with. That's a really, really good point. The Cavs struggled with them a lot. And speaking of the Cavs, I want to move next to Cleveland and Golden State because I don't think there's really much to be worried about with these two, to be honest. Cleveland maybe a little bit more so than Golden State, but with Golden State, they're now 3-2 this year, I believe. Offensive rating is through the roof. Defense has been kind of messy so far, but I think that's more just due to them not really giving a shit.
Exactly.
I think that the Warriors are going to be fine. I don't think anyone is super concerned about that. The Cavs, on the other hand, I'm not worried necessarily. I think that they're going to be able to turn it on come playoff time. I do think that it's going to be more difficult for them to coast during the regular season and still win like 52 games, though. Their defense is just so bad. I agree.
And it's been bad. So it was this bad last year.
January onward, yep.
Yeah, it was terrible last year, and I railed about this. And I even thought for a while there, I was like, I just don't see him making the finals. And then LeBron becomes, Superman during the playoffs like he always does. But at some point, that's not going to happen. If LeBron, he's dealing with this ankle tweak, and he's playing 41 minutes a night.
Yeah.
If anything happens to LeBron, this is a lottery team. They're that bad.
I agree with you.
And LeBron is that good. And so, they still are going to live and die with LeBron, and most likely they make the finals. But, man, it is such a slippery slope with that team. And we saw it with the Nets last night. Again, they're going to struggle with youth. When they play young teams that get up and down and run and shoot a lot of threes, they're going to struggle. And that's something else that's been surprising about the Cavs is that they're not generating a lot of open threes anymore. And it's interesting because, they shot so many last year, but it should be obvious because of the minutes that they're giving to these non-shooters, and, Dwayne Wade being one of them. And so,
it's almost like when you go out and sign Dwayne Wade and Derrick Rose, it's going to totally change the fabric of what you do on the perimeter.
Exactly. And so, there's not a whole lot we can take away because we basically know all these players. They've been around enough, and we know LeBron. So I don't know, man. I still think they have to be the favorite to make the finals. But one problem with LeBron, man, and they're just, like I said, I don't think they make the playoffs at all. Like if LeBron tonight were to suffer a season-ending injury, I mean, this is like a 35-win team.
Oh no, I think they're worse than that. If LeBron,
really,
I think they would start tanking if LeBron would suffer a season-ending injury. I think they would try and get 2 lottery picks this year with the Nets pick. So not the worst strategy in the world if LeBron is hurt. No. But with LeBron, you kind of have to go for it just because he's LeBron.
Agreed.
I'm not sold on this team defensively enough to think that. I don't know that they're going to be the 1 seed. I'll say that. In fact,
I think that they're probably the 2 or 3 seed.
I would say they're not going to be the 1 seed in the East at this stage. I feel pretty good about saying that. Teams like maybe Boston will figure it out, but the 2 that I look at right now are Toronto and Washington. Toronto has looked really, really good with this new ball movement offense. DeMar DeRozan's playing almost like a little bit more of a playmaker role, it seems like, within their offense. He's not necessarily ball stopping as he was so used to doing and so prone to doing throughout the early part of his career. Kyle Lowry's been really good. Some of their younger players have stepped up. OG Anunoby, as I mentioned on the podcast with Cole a couple days ago, looks pretty good, I think. He doesn't, I'm still, still holding back a little bit just because, he's averaging 5 points a game and 20 minutes a game. He's fine. But at the same time, getting good minutes from him, getting good minutes from Norman Powell, getting good minutes, from DeLon Wright as well, as I think is a guy that's been pretty solid so far. It says a lot about where they're at and how much continuity can really help a team even if you're changing systems, just having the players that know each other and know each other's tendencies. I mean, it does help even if you're changing schemes.
Yeah, well, and there's a lot of the chemistry that you build up with guys, no matter how you're playing. Mm-hmm. And so you know where guys like the ball. You know where guys miss on their shots. So for rebounds and things like that, you know where guys kind of tend to mess up on defense, so you know how to cover for them, things like that. So yeah, that continuity is great. I mean, the DeMar DeRozan playmaker thing is something I've talked about for a while with him. I even mentioned, much to my chagrin, that maybe he should come off the bench.
That'll never happen.
No, it won't. But my idea was just to split those DeMar and Kyle Lowry minutes more, so that DeMar was the de facto backup point guard. It wasn't so much to bring him off the bench. It's more just, let's give him more time as that lead playmaker without taking the ball out of Lowry's hands too much.
Well, he's always been like a really good ball handler, obviously, who can create separation. But I think he's always been a sneaky passer, too, whenever he decides to pass it. The issue is in the past been that he was so willing to stop the ball. This year, it does look like he's just more interested in passing, I think, as well.
Yeah, and taking corner threes as they arrive, which is that's something I've talked about for a long time. And, Norman Powell looks great. I actually think Jakob Poeltl looks really, really good, to the point where I think he might actually be the better starter at center over Valanciunas. So they've got some decisions to make there. I still think that their ceiling is basically where they are currently. I don't think this team is going to make it to the finals. I don't think they're built for the playoffs. We've seen this sort of act before, and I wouldn't be shocked if someone internally doesn't develop enough to kind of make Masai feel like they're getting an extra boost. I wouldn't be shocked if we see like a bigger trade than we expect with Toronto, just because they have to know internally that they're at their peak.
Well, I don't think it's this year. I think it might be next year that we see that. I think that they're going to go with what they got this year and see if this new offense really kind of is the boost that they need, right? Like, they're 2-2 so far. Like, we're not going to sit here and say that they're amazing, but their point differential is awesome, though.
Absolutely, and they look good against the Warriors, even if the Warriors are being lazy. Like,
right.
Still the Warriors.
Right. Yeah. And you know what? You mentioned kind of the big man rotation. They're still trying to figure out who the best guy next to Serge Ibaka is. Like, it seems like despite having a summer with him, despite having the end of the year last year with him, they still haven't quite figured that whole thing out. Jonas Valanciunas has started twice, and I believe he has like a small nick, I believe, right? Like, he's not like super hurt.
No.
They started Bebe once. They started Pascal Siakam last night.
That's almost in the right direction.
Yeah,
if it was my team, it'd be CJ Miles, and Ibaka would be the 5.
I think that's your closing lineup for sure. Starting out games, I can kind of see it doing things a little bit differently, maybe trying to go with 2 bigs. Ibaka's a little bit more like a traditional big than he used to be, certainly. So I don't know exactly what they're going to do long term, but I'm very interested in just the different style that this team is playing and seeing if that is a little bit more conducive to playoff success. Seeing if, taking a chance on this group and saying, you know what, maybe it was the scheme. Maybe it was we were just trying to go ISO too often in the playoffs and it wasn't really working. We're going to try something new with these guys. If it doesn't work, maybe then we'll blow it up. But I want to see what this team can do still. I've always liked this team for some reason. They've had a soft spot in my heart.
Yeah, the biggest problem with their offense has always been the stuck-in-the-mud offense that they run generates a ton of tough looks. And in the playoffs, those looks are even tougher because you've got even less space because defenses are locked in. And so, like, DeMar is so good at hitting these contested mid-range shots, and you think, okay, well, we've got a shot in the playoffs, and then, you run into, like, Giannis, and he's just stuffing everything. So, even though they won that series, it felt like Milwaukee was going to win for a decent stretch. So I think that's the biggest problem with Toronto has always been when they get to the playoffs, what they ran before just didn't work. So if this is real, again, just like Orlando, if this is real, then, hey, who knows what's going to happen? Hard to predict.
Bigger surprise so far in terms of negative play. Denver having the worst offense that I can really see. I mean, I think that they're like 7th or so or 7th to last, in offensive rating, but they just really haven't had it so far this year. Nikola Jokic has been very strange in terms of body language. He's been very strange in terms of, just a total lack of shooting the basketball at times this year, or his Minnesota's just overall issues been a little bit more of a surprise to you?
I'll start with Minnesota. So Denver is more of a surprise to me. Minnesota, I'm not shocked by. Their defense was atrocious last year.
Their defense is 30th in the NBA right now, by the way.
Exactly. And I don't think I like the idea of bringing in Jimmy Butler because he's a great player, and I understand, Taj Gibson will get these guys. I'm sorry, it just doesn't work that way. You don't just bring guys in and overnight they're going to take bad defensive players that have bad habits and they're just going to fix them, and especially with a short training camp. Now, this isn't to say that by the end of the season they won't be playing passable defense, but from what I've seen from Andrew Wiggins and from what I've seen from Karl Anthony Towns, those guys are not good defenders. Doesn't mean they won't be at some point, but right now they're not. Karl Anthony Towns often just out of position because he's trying to make a spectacular play. Wiggins is just weird, man. Like off ball, he falls asleep a lot. On ball, I don't know, it's like he's scared to foul, so he's not very physical.
I think he's been a little bit better on ball this year, guarding not the opponent's best player. And
that helps.
That really helps. But you're right, off the ball, Cole and I talked about this on the podcast this week. Off the ball, he's still just a mess. Like, it's attentiveness. He just doesn't have the attentiveness that you need. I did think that this team might be able to at least not be last defensively. Like, maybe they would be, middle of the pack early in the season defensively, if only because Jimmy Butler and Taj Gibson know exactly what Tibbs wants to run. And I thought that those guys might also be able to help the young guys kind of come together and be a bit more of a cohesive unit early on. Just hasn't worked out so far. It's been really, really ugly. I don't think they're scrambling yet necessarily, trying to figure out the answers, but I think it's very clear they have not yet figured out the answer to how they're going to go about trying to win games this year on the defensive end.
Yeah, I had them as like the 7th or 8th seed just based on Jimmy Butler. Mm-hmm. And, without Jimmy Butler, I think this is a lottery team. And, Jeff Teague is not very good at the point of attack on defense.
No.
And he's not a good enough shooter to give up as much as he gives up on defense. So, I not to sound like I'm the smartest guy in the world, but I was never sold on this thing where Minnesota was going to be like the 4th or 5th best team in the West. And,
that was weird.
I understand. Yeah, it takes time, man. Like last year, people wanted to anoint them, like we just talked about before. Oh, it's a 50-win team. And a lot of people kind of fell for that stuff, man. And it just takes so long. Like,
Vegas
you know how it works. Exactly, I know. I should have bet money. And now, so to move to Denver, now this is the weirdest thing that I've seen. And Adam Mares, actually, Denver Stiffs, he wrote a nice breakdown of like what is going on with their offense in his like column about their X's and O's. I suggest everyone read that. It is really, really weird. It's like they're taking the ball out of Jokic's hand a little bit too much on offense and allowing Millsap to kind of facilitate a little bit, and just it's not working out well. And then Jamal Murray is just not really hitting shots. So there's two big things right there that's causing their offense to be so funky.
Yeah, if you would have made me guess, I would not have said that 4 games into the year, Nikola Jokic, the team has been worse offensively with him on the floor than they've been with him off the floor. That's not going to hold up. Nikola
He
Jokic
looks weird.
Too good, but he looks very strange in terms of his body language right now.
Disinterested, man. And I just did not expect that. I mean, they were the number 1 offense in the league last year after Jokic joined the starting lineup.
Yeah.
And I don't know, man. I talked to Adam a lot, and I've privately shared my concerns with him about Jokic's conditioning and maybe his lack of commitment to the basketball, like the work that is required to be a top-flight basketball player. And what happens is now guys have tape on Jokic, so they kind of know what's coming. So now you've got to be able to get better.
But I think that what made him so good was the unpredictability factor, right?
Exactly.
Like, you never knew the way that his mind was rolling. He has that unique offensive mind that it's really difficult to game plan for. You know what I mean?
Exactly. Yeah, and their defense is not good enough to withstand not having an amazing offense.
Right.
And so if this is what they are, which I don't think this is the case. I think this is one of those things where their lack of training camp definitely hurt them. I have a theory about this, that some of these teams are really they're punished a little bit more than some others, because the Nuggets offense requires a lot of precision cutting and passing and things like that to generate their looks. And so the defenses are actually ahead of them right now, because defense doesn't really change that much. But they've got some new parts that they're trying to work into their offense. I think it's going to take them a little bit to kind of pick up steam. Whereas on the defensive end, most teams should be ahead of where the offenses are. I don't know if that makes sense. Sort of like the first month of baseball season.
Sure. Pitchers are ahead of hitters.
Exactly. And I think that's what we're running into right now a little bit with Denver. I think it will sort itself out. And this is a case where it is a little too early to tell. I think we should know something by about game 15 or so. If this is still happening, there's an issue.
Yeah, I agree. They've just looked so bad on offense so far. Like, just in turn, I can only say it enough, but like even Jamal Murray looks like he gets down a little bit after missing shots, and Gary Harris fights on the floor. Like, he really battles. Him and Paul Millsap are the two guys that I look at that need to like kind of drag this team up and say, hey, we need to get going. Maybe we need to spend a little bit more time off the floor kind of figuring this out. We need to try and just figure out a way to make our offense whole again, because you would have figured that a lot of these additions over the course of the last 12 months made sense. Like, Mason Plumlee does not make sense next to Nikola Jokic, but he makes sense off the bench as a replacement for Nikola Jokic.
Sure.
Paul Millsap is a ball movement first guy who can also knock down shots, who can attack closeouts and get to the paint and knock down floaters, hit mid-range shots. You would think that that's a really good fit within this offense. Jamal Murray playing a little bit more. He's the kind of point guard that, as a shot maker, you would think would fit really well next to Nikola Jokic. It's just really strange that none of these pieces, I know it's so early, but you would think that just the general skill set fit would make sense so far, and it hasn't.
Yeah. I mean, Gary Harris has basically been their best player so far this year. I mean, Will Barton has been their best offensive player, but I think Gary Harris, just on both sides of the ball, has been their best player.
I agree with you. I think Harris has been awesome.
Yeah, and it's really, the Jokic thing is just really weird to me. It stood out quite a bit. The most bizarre
thing that's happened so far in the NBA season for me.
Yeah, I don't understand it, because it's not something that we can just, I can't just go ask him, hey, what's up? Because the body language is terrible.
Yeah. He
just looks disinterested. I mean, there's a defensive possession on a pick and roll, and I'm assuming they called a switch, but he just didn't move. And that's beyond just bad defense. That's disinterest, and I'm actually surprised that Mike Malone didn't just sit him, because there's something is up. I don't know what it is, but there's something.
Let's talk about a positive surprise that I didn't necessarily see coming. I think this is the least talented team in the NBA. The Brooklyn Nets look good. They're 3-2 so far. Their offense has been really, really good. The defense has not been great, but I don't think that's ever really going to be the case where the defense is great. A couple of guys that have really stood out. I talked about D'Angelo Russell on the podcast on Tuesday or Wednesday when I talked with Cole. Don't know that I need to get into that a crazy amount more. Joe Harris off the bench has been really solid. His floor spacing has really helped them so far. Spencer Dinwiddie's been awesome. He looks like a very real rotation player in the NBA, and that's incredibly valuable for them. Karis LeVert is a guy I didn't talk about in the Young Players podcast. Probably should have. He's been really, really good so far. I think he's leading that team in minutes. His length has been at least useful defensively. He's still not great on that end. He's not strong. He's not like the most instinctual player on that end, but the length helps, especially whenever they play such wide open basketball like they do. It's just a fun team to watch. I kind of thought that when Jeremy Lin went down, this was going to be a team that wasn't necessarily hard to watch, but a team that was going to struggle to get in and out of their sets despite having a coach in Kenny Atkinson that's really good. I thought that they might get a little bit sticky with the ball from time to time. That's happened a little bit, but that's just kind of the way it's going to go with some of the guys they have. Overall, I've really enjoyed this team. I don't know if it's going to stand up, though.
They're one of my favorite teams to watch. I love what Kenny Atkinson's doing. Mozgov is shooting threes. And I think that's it's great. And the thing is, like, you know, he's actually got a nice touch, so I'm not shocked that he can step out and hit a corner three, just like with Brook Lopez, same thing. And, I mean, I won't go into D'Lo since you guys just talked about him, but just know I'm a huge D'Angelo Russell fan. I think the Lakers made a huge mistake giving up on him.
Yeah, this podcast is the D'Angelo Russell friend zone.
Good, perfect. But Karis LeVert's a guy that I loved when he was drafted by them last year, and he's a really, really good athlete. I think he will defend. I think he just needs to get more comfortable. Like you said, he needs to get stronger. I think that's important, especially if you're going to have him be this wing defender that's going to defend twos, threes, and sometimes fours.
Yep.
Rondé, to me, is
that's a good one,
like
too.
A Draymond Light for this team right now. He's been grabbing and going a lot of defensive rebounds, and that's ignited their offense quite a bit. I love how they hot potato the ball around, and they're finding open guys. The hit-ahead pass, you know, they're looking up court, and they may not be very good, but they're at least fun. And you know, and I hate to be one of these guys that says plays the right way, but they play the right way. Like they really do. The ball sticks occasionally, but when it does, it's things like, okay, D'Angelo Russell is waiting for Jared Allen, who's a rookie, to come up so he can run the screen and roll because it's important, right? Like, they need to run the screen and roll with Jared Allen because Jared Allen's going to provide vertical spacing by the end of the season. Once he figures out what he's supposed to be doing.
We did talk about him on the podcast. I've liked what I've seen from him so far.
He was a great pickup.
He's been really bad defensively, but the offense has been good.
And he'll get there defensively. I think he will protect the rim. Again, it takes a while. Especially, I mean, how many guys come in as rookies and are good defenders? Jaylen Brown is about it.
As a big man?
As a big man, none. So I think once think about it like a horse, like a baby horse being born, right? And they've got those wobbly legs. It takes them a little bit to get their feet under them, and that's how it is for point guard defenders and centers. I mean, they're the two toughest positions to guard, and so it takes them a minute. And their flaws are going to be glaring because they're either giving up the drive to the hoop or they're giving up the bucket at the basket. So it looks worse than it actually is. But yeah. You brought up Joe Harris. They're running him off dribble handoffs out on the wing for threes right off the dribble or right off the handoff. Love that. I mean, Kenny Atkinson knows what he's doing, man.
Great coach.
And like I said, when the Celtics made the trade for Kyrie Irving, that Nets pick is not as valuable as people were thinking it was when that trade was made because the Nets are actually better. I don't think they're like maybe the fifth or sixth worst team in the league, not the Suns or the Bulls.
I think they're still pretty bad, but we'll see.
Yeah, they're not good. They're not good, but they're going to win games because they play high leverage, high variance basketball. So they're going to have a game where they hit 22 out of 43s and win, like they beat the Cavs last night. You know, nobody would have expected that. And so
now that they have shooters, like last year they did the same thing but didn't have as much shooting. Now that they have shooters, they're going to be able to play a little bit more high leverage basketball, high variance basketball.
Yeah, exactly. And so that's going to win them a bunch more games than it's going to lose them, I think. And so I mean, so you brought up Spencer Dinwiddie. He was great the other night. I mean, he was a star of that game against Cleveland. And so I love the Nets. I've watched 4 out of their 5 games so far, and even the bad ones, because sometimes I'll skip it's Brooklyn and Indiana. No, man, that game was amazing. So
last segment here on the podcast, I'm just going to run through some teams lightning round style, ask you, is what we've seen real or is it not real? The Detroit Pistons, they're sitting at 3-2 right now, positive net rating. Real, not real.
You asked me the toughest one first, probably, because
they're interesting to me.
And they're Jekyll and Hyde. If Tobias Harris and what he's done early on, if that's real, then they're real. If it's not, if their team and if Drummond is going to defend like he did against Embiid, then no, they're not real. If Reggie Jackson is back, then they're real. And by real, I mean like 5th seed, not like they're going to the finals. But
no, of course, yeah. No, I don't think anyone thinks that this team is going to win a playoff series. But like,
no. But they should be competitive, as long as Reggie Jackson is actually healthy and back to his normal self. As long as Andre Drummond is going to show effort on defense, like he didn't last season. And if Tobias Harris is rounded into this 20-point-a-game scorer, which he'd be most improved player this year if that happens.
He'd be up there, yeah. He'd be good.
Yeah. If that's real, then yeah, man, they're real. But I don't know, man. I have a lot of doubts about Reggie.
We've said a lot of what ifs, basically.
Yeah, exactly. But I have a lot of doubts about Reggie and Andre and Tobias. We just haven't seen it.
Yeah, Reggie Jackson is the key for me. Reggie needs to be probably even a little bit better than what he's been so far. He's at like 15-6, been limiting turnovers, which is a huge factor for them. Still not doing it all that efficiently yet as a scorer, but I guess if he can be a pick and roll playmaker as he's shown so far, that's not going to turn the ball over. Maybe that's enough. I think he just needs a little bit more, not a lot more, just a little bit more to keep this thing going. All right, let's go with Memphis.
Wait, one more thing about the Pistons. I will say I think Drummond's free throws are close to real.
I agree with you.
I watched him miss
like 80% real, but I think that they're going to be like maybe 65 to 70%.
65 to 70. And what made me know this, and this is so random, but I've worked with a lot of shooters. He missed a free throw, and he really thought that thing was going in. Mm-hmm. And that's the difference. Like now he looks confident when he's taking these free throws, and so much of that was mental for him.
Well, you watch Andre Robertson, and the ball comes out of his hand differently every single time, and you can tell he just doesn't have faith in it because he doesn't know the way it's going to come out of his hand. It looks like to me the ball's coming out of Drummond's hand a lot more consistently in the same spot with better rotation, and that just at least gives that muscle memory that you develop gives you a lot more confidence, especially when it's the right result that's happening. Not even from a make or miss perspective, but just from, okay, this is what I'm supposed to be doing. This is mechanically a lot better than where I was. This is good.
Absolutely. Yep.
Memphis. Real, not real. 3-1 so far. I believe that they're right around a 5 net rating. A 4.1 net rating, I'm sorry.
It's going to make me look pretty dumb for what I predicted, but I think they're real. They are finally able to put more shooters on the court with Conley and Gasol, and that was one of their big Achilles heels last year. Their defense hasn't dropped off the way I expected. I thought that, getting rid of, not having Tony Allen and not having these guys that were negative shooters but positive defenders, I really thought it would hurt them defensively. I expected a bump in the offense, but I really expected a huge drop in the defense, and it hasn't happened. I mean, they've been really good. Beating the Warriors and the Rockets back-to-back is probably as good a 2-game stretch as anyone's going to have this year, as far as quality wins.
Yeah, the key for me, I mean, the shooting hasn't been great so far. Like they're at 35%. I think some of that's a little bit unsustainable, to be honest. Like Marc Gasol is knocking at 47%. Tyreek Evans is not going to hit 39% from 3. What I like is that they have defensive continuity, even though they have new pieces. I just like the energy they play with too. Mike Conley and Marc Gasol just have this seamless, chemistry together, and I think that their teammates feed off of that, and they have a lot of guys like Andrew Harrison, like Ennis, like Evans, like Brandon Wright is again another guy like that. Athletic guys who can feed off of that energy in a very positive manner.
Yeah, and let's not forget Dillon Brooks has been pretty good for this team, coming in and contributing as a rookie, and that's
feisty dude.
And they never have that, and so this is sort of like it's the grit and grind era is obviously over in Memphis, but they still have a little bit of that. But getting something from Dillon Brooks is just so huge for this team going forward, not just this season but next year as well. If this team even is what it is next year, I mean, Gasol is getting up there. And Conley is too, although that moving that contract is going to be nearly impossible. But I do think they are real. I think that they're going to be knocking on the door of the playoffs again. The battle for 7 and 8 in the West is going to be something special.
I don't even know about 7 and 8. Like, it feels like 5, 6, 7 and 8. Like, all of those teams are going to be between, it seems like, 45 and like 43 wins or so.
Well, Portland's going to have the best defense in the league.
You know what? I was going to ask about them next. Portland, that's a great segue, because Portland to me is fascinating for a lot of reasons. I don't think that the 32% offensive rebounding rate is going to continue, and that's how they've derived a lot of points so far. They were one of the best offensive rebounding teams in the NBA after Yusuf Nurkic got there last year, though. Do you think they're real, or do you think that what we've seen so far is not real?
I had them pegged as my 5th seed in the West, so I think this is at least close to real. I don't think the defense is as good, and I don't think the offense is as good, but I think that they could have top 10 in both. Nurkic is the real deal, and he makes up for a lot. And, they're playing Aminu, which is important for this team defensively.
And, Aminu's a big one, because Aminu last year, I think, fought through injuries the entire year, as opposed to, he was out for I think he was out for like 5 weeks last year in November/December range. And I think a lot of people figured that when he got back, they would get back to normal and everything would be great. I don't think he ever really got back to normal, and I think that hindered their defense in a significant way, because he can cover up a lot of holes. I don't think that they're this good. They're not going to have a 17 net rating this year.
Oh, no. Now, it's definitely not going to be this good, but I think that they're going to be a threat in the first round of the playoffs. I think, if it's them and the Thunder, I think they're going to give them everything they've got, and it's going to be a close series. They're not that far off from being a top 4 seed, I think, in the West. They're like one guy away. Like, if they didn't have Evan Turner, and they could get one, I don't know, if they could get Middleton instead of Evan Turner, like that's that big of a leap for them, I think. CJ continuing the blistering shooting he was doing last year. Yeah. Dame is obviously Dame, but the Nurkic thing is, that effect has been really real for their defense.
Yeah, I agree with that. Nurkic does look very real at this stage, I would say. He's doing basically the same thing he did last year, 15, 10, and 3 with, a couple of blocks a game. This seems like what he's going to do in Portland at this stage. He's done it over the course of like 25 games now. Maybe he slows down a little bit as the season goes forward. He's never played like a 100% full 82 game season, and he's a big guy, right? Like,
but he did come in. He did come in excellent shape. He dropped weight. He looks a little quicker.
That's true.
And I think that'll help him. And not to mention, Caleb Swanigan is going to be able to eat some minutes at the 5. Zach Collins will play a little bit. Myers Leonard's healthy. They've got a good rotation there that I think will help him kind of sustain this for the season. So far on the season, he is playing 25 minutes a game. Mm-hmm. And if they can make it so that by April he's playing 30, for the playoffs, that's going to be huge for them.
Yeah, and I think he's capable of that. I do like the fact too that they're letting CJ do just a little bit more within the offense. It's not a lot more, it's just a little bit more. And that little bit more has allowed him to not see a major drop off in efficiency, and he's been really, really good throughout the entire season so far.
Yeah, he's going to have a 50-40-90 season.
At some point, I agree with you. I don't know if it'll be this year, but I agree that he's going to have something similar to that at some point.
He's just such a good shooter, man. It's insane.
All right, the last team I want to ask you about, and by the way, I'm going to say slightly not real with Portland. I think they're like a 42, 43 win team, not necessarily like they're playing, like a 100 win team in an 82 game schedule right now. Maybe we can call that more realistically like a 52 win team. I think they're a little bit less than that. Okay. I will say this too. The Los Angeles Lakers, real or not real from what we've seen? 2-2, -5.5 net rating. They've been feisty in some spots, though. They beat Washington last night. They beat Phoenix during Phoenix's disaster start. I don't really know what to take away from them so far, but I'm going to ask you.
I don't think they're going to be this good defensively. and I don't think they're going to be this bad offensively.
They've been kind of boring so far offensively,
they have.
Which is weird.
Yeah, it's almost like Luke Walton has kind of chained up the playbook a little bit.
Yeah.
And I actually have some questions about Luke Walton and his X's and O's. I think so much of that in Golden State was Kerr on his own. You know, he did a lot of the X's and O's, and I think Walton was great at the player management part, the ego management and stuff like that. He was him and Draymond had a great relationship, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I think that the staff that he has in LA is not that great at the X's and O's, and I think we're starting to see, you know, in the limited offense that they're running, part of that. The other thing is that Kyle Kuzma should be starting and should be getting like 28 to 30 minutes a night because he's their best player right now, today. I mean, Brook Lopez is their best player.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think Brook's really good.
Yeah, Kyle Kuzma is their best young player. Okay, Brook Lopez doesn't really count. He's kind of like, you know, he's really an expiring contract that's just like really, really good. But Kuzma he's the best option they have.
Caldwell Pope's probably a little bit better than he is too.
You think?
Yeah.
I just think that Kuzma's ability to score from every single spot on the court is so valuable. And I guess KCP, though, brings more value on the defensive end. So
yeah, I'll say this, too, though. I think he's their best out of, like, Lonzo Ball, Brandon Ingram, Julius Randle out of that group. Yeah. I think he's been their best player so far.
Absolutely. Okay. All right, so we agree on kind of the premise that I'm getting at.
For sure, yeah.
I think that they keep telling Brandon Ingram to shoot these contested mid-range jumpers.
They're putting the ball in his hands a ton and asking him to create.
It's not good for his development.
You don't think so?
It's not good for his confidence. No, I think that he would be better off just getting it in the flow of the offense instead of forcing the issue.
Mm-hmm.
Let him build his confidence, sticking open shots from the corner. I mean, look at like the Kawhi Leonard example is such an extreme, but I think it's a good one. If you look at the way he was brought along, I mean, remember his job on offense for a while there was move the ball and get in the corner, right? And I think that for young players, it's a good way to go. Brandon Ingram is a shooter who can't shoot right now. So let's worry about that instead of also creating his own shot because it's not like he's creating good looks.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think he can shoot. But I think that he forces himself into bad shots a lot because he's not strong enough on the ball yet to really create efficient looks for himself. And I don't know why people I think Brandon Ingram's been fine so far this year, at least compared to what I thought he was going to be. You know what I mean?
Totally
like
fine.
He is 100% fine. Like he was a project from the moment that they drafted him. He is 6'10" with like a 7'4" wingspan and weighed like 185 pounds when they drafted him. Of course it was going to take time. And he's put on some pretty good weight so far this year. He's he's going to basically, by the time he fills out his frame, he's going to have to relearn how to use his entire body.
Absolutely.
And I think he's in the process of that right now, even as he continues to incrementally put on weight. I think that it's totally different from like a proprioception, manner where, you have to figure out how, when you get hit, how it affects your body and how things affect your body overall as you continue to move. It's very difficult. It's something that Kristaps Porzingis went through, except he went through it in the not so bright lights of Sevilla as opposed to Ingram doing it in Los Angeles. And I think that's making some people freak out a little bit. Overall, I'm just not worried about Brandon Ingram.
Yeah, I'm not yet. I mean, again, like you said earlier in the podcast, I think that jumping the gun on these guys is just it's a mistake.
Yeah.
Especially a guy like Ingram who was not this anywhere close to a finished product when he was drafted. He was always going to be a 3 or 4 year guy, to see anything close to what his potential was going to be. And
by the way, right. He's averaging 15, 5, and 3 through these first 4 games. He's not doing it efficiently, but even just the fact that he's been able to get that shot off even to average 15 points and that he's making an impact passing the basketball and he's grabbing a few rebounds per game. It's not awesome, but it's a good sign at least.
Yeah, I wish he wasn't, fouling so much, but that's on the defensive end. We're more worried about his offensive development anyway. That's what this all these guys. That's what we're rating them on when we're rating them anyway. But
I think defense is going to be fine for Ingram eventually too. Again,
he's long.
He's long. He's fluid. He might not be like the most explosive guy, but that's another thing too. Is he continues to put on muscle mass, he's going to gain explosiveness. Like that's what guys do. Like Giannis, when he got to the NBA, was not nearly the athlete he is now. Yeah,
and the other thing you brought up with him was, how he's changed his body and he's learning how to use it, and you can see that because now he's initiating contact.
Right.
Going up to finish, and that's so important for wings. It's one of the skills that I think just isn't developed enough in younger guys, is to teach them, if you initiate the contact, you don't have to worry about getting knocked off balance.
Right.
You create your own balance by initiating that contact and being able to finish through it and around it. And so we're finally seeing that out of him. The one summer league game that he played, that was my big takeaway, was, oh wow, I just saw him attack a closeout and finish inside through contact and actually get the ball up and finish.
He just went through Bryce Johnson.
Exactly. Exactly. And so he wasn't able to do that in his rookie year. So it stands to reason that he will just get better and better at this as it goes on. Again, I'm not worried yet. I still think they made a huge mistake trading D'Angelo Russell.
I agree.
Like, if your choice was Ingram or Russell, I think I'd rather have Russell. But they didn't have to make that choice. But I've been talking about this trade for the last 3 days on Twitter, and I'm really tired of talking about it. But D'Angelo Russell is going to be really, really good. Ingram, I don't know.
We'll see.
Yeah.
Dave, tell the people again where they can find your podcast. We got to cut this conversation, man. We've been going for like an hour 10.
You can find my podcast anywhere you listen to podcasts, whatever app or whatever you're using to listen to this one. Just type in On the NBA. And I'm the first one that pops up. On the NBA with Dave DuFour, and I record on a fairly regular schedule. I just did a Spurs deep dive yesterday, so this was like perfect timing to talk a lot about the Spurs. And then on Twitter at Dave DuFour NBA, I live tweet games a lot, and I will often throw up video with a little bit of analysis, and I make a lot of jokes. So
the jokes,
you like those things? Yeah, exactly. Well, the people come for the analysis; they stay because of the jokes.
That's a good way to put it. This has been the Game Theory Podcast. Please remember, rate, review, and subscribe to us on iTunes. And then go rate, review, and subscribe to Dave's podcast as well. It really helps move up in the ratings. It really helps expose the podcast to a wider audience. Please also subscribe to The Athletic. That might help keep me employed. I enjoy employment. I don't know about you guys. I think that my employment is based on people deciding The Athletic is a good thing. So I would hope that you guys are enjoying the content over there. We'll be back next week with some more NBA breakdown. Cole will be on again next week. It'll be a fun time. But until next time, we will talk soon. Bye.